The tense exchange between FBI Director Kash Patel and Senator Cory Booker on Capitol Hill was not just another partisan clash, but a window into a far deeper institutional and legal crisis unfolding at the very top of American law enforcement. Because Booker's accusation that Patel has weakened the FBI by purging experienced agents, dismantling institutional memory, lowering hiring standards, and leaving massive vacancies that Patel himself admitted could take up to 14 years to fill, is not merely a critique of management style, but an indictment of leadership that may have lasting consequences for national security. And those concerns become exponentially more serious when placed alongside the extraordinary legal jeopardy Patel now faces on multiple fronts, including a federal judge's explicit threat of immediate arrest for criminal contempt over his refusal to produce Epstein-related records, and a series of civil lawsuits from fired FBI officials alleging that Patel knowingly and intentionally broke the law to remove agents who either worked on Trump-related investigations or engaged in constitutionally protected protest activity. Because according to reporting from the December hearing, Judge Richard Berman gave Patel a hard deadline of December 20th at 5 p.m. to turn over all court-ordered Epstein documents or face a warrant for immediate arrest with federal marshals prepared to take him into custody, rejecting Patel's arguments about classification, privilege, and ongoing investigations as excuses that had already been litigated and lost in prior rulings, and making unmistakably clear that even the FBI director is not above the law. A moment that transformed Patel's situation from theoretical future exposure into present-tense operational legal risk, particularly given the explosive political sensitivity of the Epstein files, which involve a convicted sex trafficker whose connections to powerful figures across business, politics, and media have generated years of speculation, public outrage, and demands for transparency. So Patel's resistance to producing those records, whatever the internal justification, creates the unavoidable appearance, fair or not, of shielding information that could damage elites or politically connected individuals, while simultaneously the wrongful termination lawsuits filed by senior FBI agents allege that Patel fired them for political reasons rather than legitimate performance grounds, including their involvement in investigations touching Donald Trump and their participation in racial justice protests following the murder of George Floyd, both of which implicate core constitutional protections under the First Amendment's free speech guarantees and the Fifth Amendment's due process constraints on arbitrary government action. And what makes these cases especially dangerous for Patel is that the complaints and congressional filings reportedly quote him acknowledging that firing agents without cause violated FBI rules and federal law, acknowledging that he knew he could be sued for doing so, yet proceeding anyway because his job depended on removing agents who worked on cases involving Trump, which, if authenticated through testimony, recordings, or contemporaneous documentation, would establish knowing and intentional violations of law rather than mere bureaucratic misjudgments, dramatically increasing his personal civil liability and potentially exposing him to further legal consequences, especially combined with reports that Patel has repeatedly invoked the Fifth Amendment and stalled under oath in related proceedings, behavior that judges have reportedly characterized not as good faith protection against self-incrimination, but as abusive and obstructive to the judicial process, suggesting a pattern of evasion rather than transparency. And when these elements are viewed together, the contempt threat with a ticking deadline, the Epstein document fight, the purging of career law enforcement professionals, the alleged admissions of unlawful intent, the civil lawsuits alleging retaliation, the broader political context of Trump's influence, and the institutional damage Booker described, it paints a picture of a law enforcement chief not merely under political pressure, but under compound legal and ethical jeopardy, facing accountability from courts at the same time he is accused of reshaping the FBI to serve presidential loyalty rather than institutional independence. And this matters not only because Patel himself is exposed, but because it illustrates a broader pattern in which Trump's inner circle figures absorb the legal consequences of executing his preferences, while Trump benefits from presidential immunity. Meaning Patel becomes a test case for whether those who weaponize institutions for political ends will face real consequences. And as the deadlines pass, the lawsuits advance, and the courts continue to press for compliance, Patel's situation represents one of the most legally volatile and politically consequential accountability battles in modern American governance, where the rule of law, judicial authority, separation of powers, and the independence of federal law enforcement are all being tested at the same time, with implications not just for one man's career, but for the credibility of the FBI itself, the trust of the public in the justice system, and the long-term resilience of democratic institutions against politicization, retaliation, and the corrosion of professional norms. Because when experienced agents are purged for loyalty reasons, when courts are defied over document production, when legal risk is managed through stalling rather than compliance, and when constitutional protections are treated as obstacles rather than boundaries, the damage does not stop with one administration or one director, but reverberates through the entire system, weakening internal morale, discouraging whistleblowers, chilling lawful investigation, and signaling to future officials that power can be used to punish enemies and protect allies until the judiciary forcibly intervenes. And that is why the clash between Booker and Patel, the Epstein contempt deadline, the lawsuits from fired agents, and the broader political context all merge into a single narrative about whether the United States remains a country where even the most powerful law enforcement official must obey court orders, respect constitutional rights, and preserve the independence of the institutions he leaves, or whether loyalty to a president can override law, precedent, and professional duty until judges and juries intervene, making Patel's legal exposure not just a personal crisis, but a referendum on the rule of law itself, in an era of hyperpolarization, executive power expansion, and the increasing temptation to treat federal agencies as political weapons rather than public trusts.